All right, my job tonight is to talk about Narnian eschatology, otherwise known as the Aslan apocalypse. And I think a better working title, one that I put at the top of my notes, is The Confusion of Good and Evil and the End of Worlds. Now, you've heard the statement. We say this throughout human history, we've said the statement all good things must come to an end. May I posit this idea? This is not true. In fact, this statement must be defied with every fiber of your being. Instead, we must remember this. All things tainted by sin and evil must come to an end, right? Which means I have to come to an end. You have to come to an end. And because Christ bore our sin on the cross, he came to an end. And so if you think back with me, back to the magician's nephew. The magician's nephew is kind of the creation and fall story of Narnia. One of the characters, Diggory, he unfortunately woke up Jadis, the queen of Narnia, right? And she was part of a world called Karn. What a terrible name. And so in The Magician's Nephew, there's this very interesting exchange between Aslan and Diggory. And you'll forgive me for exegeting the Chronicles of Narnia. If my enemies want to take a shot at me, go for it. What did Christ say? Unless you have the faith of a child, right? And so, son of Adam, Aslan said, there is an evil witch abroad in my new land of Narnia. Tell these good beasts how she came here. A dozen different things that he might have said flashed through Diggory's mind, but he had the sense to say nothing except for the exact truth. I brought her, Aslan. He answered in a low voice. For what purpose? I wanted her to get out of my own world back into her own. I thought I was taking her back to her own place. Well, how came she to be in your world, son of Adam? By magic. The lion said nothing. Diggory knew that he had not told enough. It was my uncle, Aslan, he said. He sent us out of our own world by magic rings. At least I had to go because he sent Polly first. And then we met the witch in a place called Karn. And she just held on to us when you met the witch, Aslan said in a low voice, which had the threat of a growl in it. Well, she woke up, said Diggory wretchedly, and then turning very white. I woke her because I wanted to know what would happen if I struck a bell. Polly didn't want to. It wasn't her fault. I fought her. I know I shouldn't have. I think it was a bit enchanted by the writing under the bell. Do you? Asked Aslan, still speaking very low and deep. No, said Diggory. I see now that I wasn't. I was only pretending. So the lion spoke again. This time it wasn't to Diggory. You see, friends, he said, that before the new clean world that I gave you is 7 hours old, a force of evil has already entered it, waked and brought hither by this son of Adam. The beasts, even Strawberry, all turned their eyes on Diggory till he felt that he wished the ground would swallow him up. But do not be cast down, said Aslan, still speaking to the beasts. Evil will come of that evil, but it is still a long way off, and I will see to it that the worst falls upon myself. In the meantime, let us take such order that for many 100 years yet this shall be a merry land and a merry world, and as Adam's race has done the harm, Adam's race shall help to heal it. Draw near, you and the other two. And so, you got to remember that Narnia fell, just like our world fell. And in the very beginning of our world, evil came in, and, it's a terrible fall when you consider it. What did the serpent say to Eve? Is it true, this is the Rosebrough paraphrase, is it true that God isn't even feeding you guys? He's not letting you eat anything? That's really kind of the gist of the question that the serpent said. And you'll note he starts with the words, did God really say? Always attacking that word of God that comes from outside. And so what did Eve do? On her back foot, she says, well, we can eat from all of the trees except for the one that's in the midst of the garden. You sit there and go, that sounds like a kid's story. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? In fact, I would argue that the whole Bible is a kid's story. Until you learn to read it like a kid, you've got a problem. Adults don't get it. Remember, Susan doesn't make it in the last battle. She was way too old, way too grown up. She was hell-bent as a child on being a young adult, and once she finally got to be an adult, she was hell-bent on trying to stay a young adult, right? The faith of a little child is what we're called to. So Eve says, well, no, we can eat of the fruit that's in the trees of the garden, just not the one that's in the middle. And then the serpent says to her, listen, the reason why God's not telling you to eat from that tree is because he doesn't want you to make your potential. He knows what you're capable of, and he's jealous. He's small-minded. He's threatened by your potential. Listen to me. Eat from that tree, and you'll be like God. And that's the thing. He doesn't want you to be like God. He wants to stay that way all to himself. And so what does the text say? Did she listen to the word of God from outside of her? No. She went, a different direction altogether. It says that she saw that the tree was beautiful to look at, desirous to make one wise. Now I'm going to date myself here. Reminds me of a song. Feelings. Nothing more than feelings. Right? 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 And she becomes an enthusiast. No doubt about it. That's what Luther says in the small called articles. Read the Confessions. She becomes an enthusiast. She looks for the word of God inside of herself, denies the word outside of her, and sin has come into our world. And like Narnia, which came to an end, our world is going to come to an end. And I want you to think about this. When you read the last battle, on a first read, it's annoying. It's annoying because when you read the correct chronology, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe first, just saying, that when you read the last battle, a magical place of Narnia, with King Caspian, with Peter, Edmund, Susan, Lucy, and the demise of Jadis, and the ending of the winter and Christmas and all of this stuff, right? All these are epic battles. You're thinking, the last battle, it's going to be spectacular, it's going to be epic. Aslan didn't even show up for it, There was no second coming in Narnia, and the whole thing was undone by a jackass wearing a lion suit. Right? Am I allowed to say that? I'm not wearing a clerical right now, so. And that's kind of the thing, is that Lewis isn't here trying to play the game that so many people play when it comes to eschatology. All right, you'll note that the world's a little bit of a bizarre place right now, right? And here's the thing. I work in marketing when it comes to Christianity. So the Trinity, they're in management. They never tell me like when things are going to happen and stuff. So what's going on in the Middle East right now? Everyone's thinking, it's the end of the world. And I'm flipping through the pages of Scripture going, it may not be. It just may not be. But there are some more interesting things to kind of look at. And so when you think about the way things happened in Narnia and how it came apart so quickly, like as I read the book, and when you kind of get to the part where like the final judgment occurs, I'm fairly convinced that most Narnians had very little clue as to what was really going on. It just kind of hit them all of a sudden. And Lewis's emphasis isn't on all of the intricate details of the last bits. His focus is on what's coming. And good eschatology is going to keep you focused on that, and keep that in mind. And so you'll note that, Narnia didn't fall to Jadis, it just fell to, should I say it this way, stupid? Right? It fell to stupid. There you've got puzzle and shift the monkey, puzzle the donkey, who doesn't really want to go along with this, kind of being cajoled and manipulated into putting on a lion's skin that just happened to wash down a river. And this shift character, what an interesting name, very shifty. I think I get what he's doing here. He convinces Puzzle to put it on, and then he, being the mouthpiece of Aslan, starts barking orders that make no sense. And here's the thing. The Narnians are confused. The Aslan that they thought they believed in didn't seem to fit with the Aslan that is in their midst. But you know what they did? They went along with it anyway. And so trees are being felled. And Narnian animals are being enslaved. And people, well, it's just going terribly. And one of the annoying bits in all of this is that in the midst of all of this, the king, he fights against what's going on and ends up murdering some bad guys and feeling bad about it. But when you read the circumstances, you sit there and go, well, yeah, that was the right thing to do, was it not? And yet there was complete lament. So what happens in Narnia is the complete flipping of good versus evil, of right versus wrong. And what's being said doesn't fit with anything the way people understood Aslan to be. But I would note that I think that Lewis here is riffing off of Christ's Olivet Discourse. Now, this is going to put me at odds with some of the scholars as it relates to their scholarly treatment of this, but I think the themes that Lewis was more going after are found in Matthew 24. Listen to how this goes out, how this runs down. It says this: Jesus left the temple. He was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. He answered them, "You see all of these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." Well, no temple means no forgiveness of sins. No forgiveness of sins, I mean, it might as well be the end of the world, right? So, as Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "Well, see that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There'll be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are but the beginning of the birth pains." And you'll note in the Narnian eschatology, the wars and rumors of wars, that really kind of goes by the wayside. Instead, the focus is really on the deception of the last days and just how alarmingly moronic it is, sad. You would expect something better, more spectacular, but in reality, it's just kind of like the dying gasp of a wheezing patient who's already on life support. And that's kind of the point. It's a world that had really kind of worn out, and so is ours. And so Christ in the Olivet Discourse warns us that false Christs, and here's where I got to point this out, there's some similarities. False Christs and false prophets will arise, and they will perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I've told you beforehand. A little exegetical point here. Pseudo-Christoi, the word for false Christs, we oftentimes think that what that is only referring to in our day and age is this idea of someone comes up and says, "I am Jesus." By the way, there's a guy doing that right now in North Carolina. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, he's convinced his entire megachurch that he's Jesus Christ. And he'll be getting a treatment on fighting for the faith before too long. But yeah, no kidding. He has multi-hour-long YouTube videos where he twists the scripture into a pretzel to prove that he's Jesus. And we oftentimes think that that's really what we should be looking for here. But I would note, pseudo-Christoi actually has a little bit of a broader meaning, and that is that somebody who is a false anointed one. If you've spent any time in the charismatic movement nowadays in the New Apostolic Reformation, they go on and on and on about people who have an anointing. They have this anointing, that anointing. They picked up a mantle here and a mantle there and all this kind of stuff. And you watch Christian television and you watch the shenanigans going on there and you sit there and go, this doesn't sound like or even look like Jesus at all. Why do I need to hear some woman claiming to be a prophetess telling me that my season of breakthrough is just around the corner? And all I need to do is sow $1,000 seed offering into her ministry. You sure that's Jesus? Right? And that's the same stuff that the Narnians were going through. And I would note that Lewis wrote The Last Battle long before TBN was on the air. He was definitely tapping into something. And so then in the Narnian eschatology, then you can see that things really went sideways quickly. And and then the king got involved in it, and that was a mess. But there was one particular thing that really kind of stood out for me in this, and that is that the claim that Aslan and Tash, the god of the Telmarines, was the same deity. It shows up here. It says, there was a woolly lamb who spoke up against what was happening. And he said, please, please, said the high voice of a woolly lamb, who was so young that everyone was surprised that he even dared to speak at all. So what is it now? Said the ape. That's Shift. He says, be quick. He said, please, said the lamb, I can't understand. What have we to do with the Calormenes? We belong to Aslan. They belong to Tash. They have a god called Tash. They say he has 4 arms and the head of a vulture. They kill men on his altar. I don't believe there's any such person as Tash. But if there was, how could Aslan be friends with him? And I love that it's a lamb that asks the question, right? All right? Well, that didn't go very well for that lamb, by the way. But that's the thing. People need to be asking these questions. Why? Why should I think that these things are from God? So the others listen. Shift said this. Tash is only another name for Aslan. All that old idea of us being right and the Calormenes being wrong, that's silly. We know better. The Calormenes use different words, but we all mean the same thing. Tash and Aslan are only 2 different names for you-know-who. And so they come up with the name Tashlan. Now, when you get home, don't do this here. When you get home, go to Google. And I want you to Google the phrase Chrislam. Chrislam. Okay? I'll tell you a story. So back in 2012, I got a phone call from the Orange County Register. And I wasn't living in Orange County anymore, but the fellow who called me was a reporter, and he wanted to get my thoughts on something that he had discovered. He had discovered that Rick Warren at Saddleback Church, that he was working with a mosque here in Southern California, and that one of his team and this mosque had put together a document called the Kingsway document. And the basic gist of the Kingsway document, when you read it, is, well, Muslims believe in one God, we believe in one God, and the details about what we believe about our one God is so similar to the way the Muslims believe about their one God that they don't finish the sentence. But the idea is actually quite simple, that we, in order to create a more safe world, need to recognize that maybe, just maybe, the God of Islam, Allah, is synonymous with the God that we worship, Yahweh. And Rick Warren was the one spearheading this. And then for a while, Brian Houston of Hillsong was putting forward similar ideas. And I would note, this all happened long after C.S. Lewis penned this. I don't think he's a prophet. I think he's just somebody who can kind of see where this all goes. When you reject the proper understanding of what's right and what's wrong, and you adopt your own philosophies, at the end of the day, all of these philosophies are going to end up undoing and upending a proper distinction of just good and evil, right and wrong. Forget about law and gospel altogether, because there is no law at the end of it. And look at the world that we live in right now, right? We can legitimately say, of the thousands of years of human history, that women have never had prostate cancer until like last year. Right? Is this because of some medical miracle? No. Instead, this has to do with a complete rejection of what's true in favor of what is false. And you look at the world as it stands right now. It just seems like on multiple fronts, it's complete chaos. If you don't believe me, just read Twitter, but only do it for 5 minutes and then delete the app. Okay. Because it's a cesspool. It legitimately is just a rumble in the jungle, and it's the weirdest thing ever. Okay, you've got full-blown Marxists fighting legitimate Nazis nowadays. And I'm sitting there going, when do the Nazis come back? Right? And the worst bit is that some of these Nazis legitimately think that we confessional Lutherans should be embracing them as brothers. And I think, did your mama drop you on your head? What? Right? This is the world that we're living in. But in this kid's story, children's story, it's fascinating to me how Lewis really put his finger on it way ahead of time. So this idea that Tash is just another name for Aslan, it's just Narnian blasphemy, right? Moving on. And this is where I should bring in one more bit of information. I want you to hear a prophecy from the Apostle Paul from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And here's what he says. Concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered together to him, we ask you, brothers, not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed, either by a spirit or a spoken word or a letter, seeming to be from us to the effect that the day of the Lord has already come. It's weird. I guess somebody back then wrote the Left Behind series, and it was being circulated among the churches on papyrus or something. So Paul says, let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion, apostasy, comes first, and then the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. I find it fascinating. That day will not come unless the rebellion comes first. And when you read the writings of the church fathers and theologians even through the Middle Ages, they all had this profound idea that this is what was going to happen as we got closer and closer to the return of Christ, that there would be an open rebellion against King Jesus within the visible church. Apostasy has no meaning if you're talking about the general population. I mean, we're all born dead in trespasses and sins and hostile to God. That's our state before we are regenerate. As a result of it, the apostasy has always been considered to be this thing that takes place within the visible church, where people who call themselves Christians would openly rebel against God and his word. That seems to be a thing happening today, and it's all over the place. I like to remind people, if you read the book of Revelation, the dragon has 7 heads. Good luck fighting it. And that's kind of the point. So when you take a look at the state of affairs for Christianity as it stands right now, I can just legitimately say, yep, it's a mess. And it's apostasy all over. But then it goes on, it says this. And this man of lawlessness, he'll oppose and exalt himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he makes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. And important to note here, this isn't talking about a third temple in Jerusalem. This is talking about Pauline theology. This is the temple known as the church. This is why when you read the Lutheran confessions, Luther argues, and the Lutheran reformers argue, that the office of the papacy itself, which exalts itself above Christ, is the office of Antichrist. And that the church is the temple of God. And so this one would then proclaim himself to be God. Do you not remember that when I was still with you and I told you these things, and now what's restraining him so that he may be revealed in his time? But then it goes on to say this: the coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Listen to what that says. So I remember as a kid being exposed to TBN for the first time, Channel 40 here in Southern California. I don't know what channel it was in other places, but Channel 40 here on the cable stations in Southern California. And just thinking to myself as I would watch men like Benny Hinn and others do their thing and sit there and go, is that really God? And people amening and whatever. And you think of Benny Hinn taking his coat and waving it, and whole groups of people falling back and falling over. And nowadays, it's not even that spectacular. Nowadays in the charismatic circles, there's a guy by the name of Todd White. He travels the world, and he finds people, he claims that one leg is longer than another or shorter than another, and he performs a leg lengthening miracle. And you sit there and go, dude, you're pulling the guy's sandal. I can see what you're doing there. And you're just rotating his foot, right? And everyone's sitting there going, ooh, it's a miracle. Praise Jesus. I'm sitting there going, what's wrong with you people? Right? But listen again to the text. Because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false. This is a terrifying idea here. And I spent some time in the charismatic church, and I look back and thinking, what was I thinking? And that's the point. Sin is so devastating in all of us, you and in me, that we actually prefer the delusion to the truth. Paul prophesied that a day would come when people would not endure sound doctrine. And so they would gather to themselves teachers who would tell them what their itching ears want to hear. You want a God that will bless same-sex marriage? No problem. We'll give you that. You want a God that will make you rich if you give televangelists $1,000? We got you covered there, bud. All right? You want a God that basically says coexists and is equal to every other expression, faith expression on planet Earth? Oh, we got that too. And you're going to know everybody who believes these things, those things grow and grow and grow and grow. But you say this, there is salvation in no one else except for Jesus Christ. And he's bled and died for the sins of the whole world, your sins and mine. And he's called us all to repent and to trust in him. And he gives us salvation completely free as a gift. And they sit there, get out of here, you extremist, hateful bigot. Right? We have a lot in common with Narnia. Well, as it turns out, one of the best lines in the book, I have to throw this in here. One of the best lines in the book comes when there is this barn and everyone's made to go through this barn door, and the people who've gone through it already and have done well, they realize that it's bigger on the inside of the barn than it is on the outside of the barn. And one of the best lines in the whole book actually comes when one of them says this, "Alas, Lord, I am no son of thine." Oh, sorry, wrong quote. Here's the quote. Queen Lucy says this, "In our world too, a stable once had something inside it that was bigger than our whole world." I love it. I was sitting in here earlier today listening to Dr. Rosenblatt and Ted talk, and they kept bringing up Christmas. And I was thinking about the fact that when I teach my catechumens, right? My catechumens, they're a fun group, kids. They're fun to teach. But one of the things we have to do as I catechize them into the Christian faith is walk them through the liturgy, walk them through the different pieces of the church service and why we do what we do. And over and again, I get to the Gloria in Excelsis. We get to that. Gloria in Excelsis. We sing that as part of a canticle through most of the church year. And so I always point them and say, now where did we hear this song first sung? And most of them can't make the connection. So I have to sing for them, which is a form of torture. I got to let you know that I think the Geneva Convention actually prevents me from doing this. But, I sing to them. Come on, you guys know. Gloria, right? In excelsis Deo. And I go, well, that's Christmas. Right. I love our liturgy because Christmas is in it almost every Sunday. That little bit of Christmas is there for us. And so when Lucy says, in our world, a stable once had something inside it that was bigger than our whole world, beautifully said, because that, I think, is one of the best allusions to the gospel in the entire book. And you'll note that you don't want to fault Lewis here as he's dealing with the eschaton, because remember the three pillars of the Christian faith are faith, hope, and love, right? Faith in Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of our sins. And then love in service to neighbor and in good works. But hope is what keeps us anchored so that in the midst of the trials and the difficulties and the sin that we have to wrestle against day in and day out, being a Christian is not easy, it's hard. And I love the fact that I heard some people say today, Christianity, if you got anyone out there who's claiming that they're winning at this, avoid them like the plague. Hang out with the losers like us, right? Right? And so when it comes time for the eschaton, and all creatures then were kind of forced to kind of walk in front of Aslan. And here's how this plays out. The creatures that came rushing on, their eyes brighter and brighter as they drew nearer and nearer to the standing stars. In Narnia, the stars are actually alive. They're not just balls of fire like they are in our universe. They're actual beings. They're sentient. They're persons. And so when the stars fell, they all came to the ground and created this big light on the ground, but they were all beings. Now, as they came right up to Aslan, one or two of things happened to each of them. They all looked straight in his face. I don't think they had any choice about that. And when some looked, the expression of their faces changed terribly. It was fear and hatred, except that on the faces of the talking beasts, the fear and hatred lasted only for a fraction of a second. And you can see that they suddenly ceased to be talking beasts. They were just ordinary animals. And all the creatures who looked at Aslan in that way swerved to their right, which was his left, and then disappeared into his huge black shadow, which, as you've heard, streamed away to the left of the doorway. The children never saw them again. I don't know what became of them. But the others looked in the face of Aslan, and they loved him, though some of them were very frightened at the same time. And all these came at the door in on Aslan's right, and there were some queer specimens among them. Eustace even recognized one of the very dwarfs who had been helped to shoot the horses, but he had no time to wonder about that sort of thing. And anyway, it was no business of his. For a great joy, put everything else out of his head. And it's here where I should mention one of the saddest bits in this story is there was a group of dwarves who, because of the deception that was taking place regarding the false Aslan and the claims of there being Tashland and all this kind of stuff, their solution was to not believe anybody about anything, and they were just all for themselves. And I would warn all of us here, I think this was another place where Lewis got it right. In the world that we live in, you'll note that the increase of wickedness, Christ says regarding our world, that in the last days, because of the increase of lawlessness, the love of many would grow cold, really cold. And that's what I fear the most, is that you'll note that there's so many people today who have been absolutely hurt by toxic false forms of Christianity. They've burned out in the game of self-righteousness. They've become exhausted on the rat wheel of a works-based religion, and as a result of it, they've deconstructed their faith, and they're done with Christianity altogether, right? And now you'll note that when anybody starts to talk the way things were in the past, we've had an increase of lawlessness. We need to get back to some law and order. Oh, you are an extremist, right? Is there any hope for us? The answer is yes, but not if you think that we're going to turn this world around. That's not how this goes. And so you'll note then that when the Narnians were finally judged, it was based upon their reaction to seeing Aslan's face. Those who hated him, off to the one side. Those who loved him, even if they were afraid, and rightly so, they went in another direction, in the right direction. And this reminds me of a often misunderstood parable of Jesus. And it's found in Matthew 25. Let me explain to you. We'll do a little exegesis here on this one. The parable of the talents. Jesus tells this story. It will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted them his property. So this is an eschatological parable of Jesus. So a man going on a journey, calling his servants and trusting them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability, and then he went away. And unfortunately, we English speakers, when we hear the word talent, we go, well, I know what that means. That means the ability to shoot a basketball. No, it doesn't. Okay? And so every time I preach on this text, I leave it in Greek. I don't actually translate it. It becomes a talanton, because you don't know what a talanton is. A talanton is a weight. It's a weight of gold. It's an amount of gold. It's not about shooting a basketball or public speaking ability or anything like this. It's about resources given to people that they're supposed to do something with it, and it has nothing to do with shooting a basketball. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more, but he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And listen to this. Here's the key to this. The key to understanding this parable is similar to what we're reading in this Narnian eschatology. The key to understanding this is, what is their reaction to the master? He who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, listen to this. Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I've made 5 talents more. Do you think he has a pretty good view of the master? Indeed, he does. The 5 talents is almost inconsequential, because the guy with 2 does the same thing. What's the matter here is that these fellows, the first 2, they legitimately have joy in seeing their master and saying, look what your talents did. So the one who had received 5 talents came forward. Master, you delivered 5 talents. Here's 5 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have 2 talents more. Right? He loves his master, doesn't he? He who had received the 1 talent came forward, and listen to this. Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what's yours. What kind of relationship do you think that guy has with the master? What view does he have of him? And note here, the master we're talking about is Jesus. Does that sound like Jesus to you? No. So his master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I haven't sown, I gather where I've scattered no seed. So then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast that worthless servant into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Same outcome. Now, there's so much more I could talk about. 45 minutes. The best part of the book is at the very end. And some of the most memorable bits is in the chapter called Farewell to the Shadowlands. And to be fair to C.S. Lewis, if you're familiar with his work, you're familiar with his philosophy and his worldview, he was highly influenced by Plato's philosophy and the allegory of the cave. And so part of that finds its way into this book, but it's artfully used here. The basic idea, you'll see it throughout his writings, is that evil practically has no existence. Okay? You are less of a being if you're evil than good. There's a weight to glory. There's a weight to goodness. When you read the Great Divorce, the bus ride from hell to heaven, you find out kind of at the end that hell's really basically the size of a thimble, and that the people who are in hell, they can't stand being in heaven because it hurts to walk on the grass because it's so sharp and they're so, well, translucent, right? And so the basic idea here then is that in the last chapter, the farewell to the Shadowlands, the big reveal is that the people there have finally arrived in true Narnia, which had been corrupted in the beginning, and now true Narnia exists finally. And you get to know what it's like to actually be in Narnia, to see it for the way it was supposed to be. And there's levels of complexity, and you go farther and farther in. It just gets better and better. But I would note that probably the best ending out of any of the books, and that is that you'll find that the donkey, the jackass that dressed like Aslan, he's redeemed. He actually makes it. And it's wonderful when you consider the implications of it. But the closing line of the book goes like this. So the very first person whom Aslan called to him was Puzzle the donkey. And you never saw a donkey look feebler and sillier than Puzzle did as he walked up to Aslan, and he looked beside Aslan as small as a kitten looks beside a Saint Bernard. So the lion bowed his head and whispered something to Puzzle, at which his long ears went down. But then he said something else, at which the ears perked up again. The humans couldn't hear what he said either time. And so then Aslan turned to them and he said to all of them, "You do not yet look so happy as I mean for you to be." And Lucy said, "We were so afraid of being sent away, Aslan." And you'll note here, this is kind of an interesting point, is that Lucy and Peter and Edmund, they're back in Narnia when they had been told they wouldn't be allowed to return. And they had actually died in a train crash and didn't even know that they were dead. You'll note that Christ in John chapter 11 says that I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me, even though he dies, yet shall he live. And anyone who dies and believes in me, he will never die. And then he asks the question, do you believe this? I want you to consider this. Each and every one of us, when we were baptized into Christ's death and into his resurrection. Every human being is born with one foot in the grave, but I would note everybody who's baptized is born anew and has one foot in the new earth already. And as a result of it, you can say this: you have already died in Christ. Everybody works their bucket list backwards from Christians. I want to go to Paris, I want to see Rome, and then I'm going to die, right? Okay. The Christian goes, well, I'm already dead, okay. And by the way, being dead's awesome because dead people have total freedom, all right? Total freedom as a dead person. You're already dead. And as a result of that, go and enjoy the freedom of being dead. You're no longer a slave to sin. That's what the whole point of your baptism is. Read Romans 6 again. So Lucy and Edmund and Peter, they died and they didn't even know they were dead. I like to think of it this way. If I'm driving down the highway and I get hit by a sugar beet truck in Minnesota, which is a real possibility in October, by the way. Okay. I kind of envision it would go something like this. Ah! Hey, Jesus, what are you doing in my car? Right? And I would be pretty much unaware of my own death. I think that's how that works. So Lucy said, we're afraid of being sent away, Aslan. You've sent us back to our own world so often. No fear of that, said Aslan. Have you not guessed? Their hearts leaped and a wild hope rose within them. There was a real railway accident, said Aslan softly. Your father and mother and all of you are, as you used to say, hang on a second here. Oh, I hate when this does that. Gotta talk to Amazon. You used to call it in the Shadowlands, you're now dead. And then here's the best words of all. The term is over. The holidays have begun. The dream is ended. This is the morning. That's good exegesis. You think when God created the heavens and the earth, there was evening and there was morning the first day. There was evening and there was morning the second day. Our days begin in the dark, according to Scripture. And you'll note when Christ returns, the sun will dawn. As he spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion. But the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them. And for us, this is the end of all stories, and we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only been the cover and the title page. Now at last, they were beginning chapter 1, one of the great story which no one on earth has even read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. The last battle's eschatology isn't about shift and puzzle and Tashlan and the twisting of the phrase, he's not a tame lion. The purpose of the last battle is to get you to keep that hope that though the world go crazy or your body fall apart, whichever comes first, though the seas roar, though the stars fall from the sky, you are in Christ. You are already dead. You have died with him in his crucifixion. He has bled and died for every one of your sins. And you'll note that not a single one of them will be held against you. On the last day, it says the books will be open and you need not worry. The reason why you need not worry is because Colossians so clearly says that the record of debt that stood against us and all of its legal demands has been canceled. It has been torn from your book and nailed to the cross of Christ with the words of Jesus scrawled across it in his own blood, debt paid in full. We're all tired. I'm tired, you're tired. It's tiring watching the world fall apart. Keep your eyes on what's coming. There's a new world coming. Christ is making all things new. And all of this will seem like a dream. And each day will be better than the next. And even Christ himself will wipe every tear from our eye. This is the purpose of good eschatology. Thanks for your time.